أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ ابتلى إبراهيم ربه بكلمات فأتمهن قال إني جاعلك للناس إماما قال ومن ذريتي قال لا ينال عهد الظالمين وإذ جعلنا البيت مثابة للناس وأمنا واتخذوا من مقام إبراهيم مصلى وعهدنا إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل أن طهر بيتي للطائفين والعاكفين والركع السجود وإذ قال إبراهيم رب اجعل هذا بلدا آمنا وارزق أهله من الثمرات من آمن منهم بالله واليوم الآخر قال ومن كفر فأمتعه قليلا ثم أضطره إلى عذاب النار وبئس المصير وإذ يرفع إبراهيم القواعد من البيت وإسماعيل ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم ربنا واجعلنا مسلمين لك ومن ذريتنا أمة مسلمة لك وارنا مناسكنا وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم ربنا وابعث فيهم رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياتك ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة ويزكيهم إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم ومن يرغب عن ملة إبراهيم إلا من سفه نفسه ولقد اصطفيناه في الدنيا وإنه في الآخرة لمن الصالحين إذ قال له ربه أسلم قال أسلمت لرب العالمين ووصى بها إبراهيم بنيه ويعقوب يا بني إن الله اصطفى لكم الدين فلا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أم كنتم شهداء إذ حضر يعقوب الموت إذ قال لبنيه ما تعبدون من بعدي قالوا نعبد إلهك وإله آبائك إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق إله واحدا ونحن له مسلمون تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم ولا تسألون عما كانوا يعملون وقالوا كونوا هودا ونصارى تهتدوا قل بل ملة إبراهيم حنيفا وما كان من المشركين قولوا آمنا بالله وما أنزل إلينا وما أنزل إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وما أوتي موسى وعيسى وما أوتي النبيون من ربهم لا نفرق بين أحد منهم وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُسْلِمُونَ فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدِ اهْتَدَوْا وَإِنْ تَوَلَّوْا فَإِنَّمَا هُمْ فِي شِقَاقٍ فَسَيَكْفِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ صِبْغَةَ اللَّهِ وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ مِنَ اللَّهِ صِبْغَةً وَنَحْنُ لَهُ عَابِدُونَ قُلْ أَتُحَاجُّونَنَا فِي اللَّهِ وَهُوَ رَبُّنَا وَرَبُّكُمْ وَلَنَا أَعْمَالُنَا وَلَكُمْ أَعْمَالُكُمْ وَنَحْنُ لَهُ مُخْلِصُونَ أَمْ تَقُولُونَ إِنَّ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ وَإِسْحَاقَ وَيَعْقُوبَ وَالْأَسْبَاطَ كَانُوا هُودًا أَوْ نَصَارَىٰ قُلْ أَنْتُمْ أَعْلَمُ أَمِ اللَّهُ وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ كَتَمَ شَهَادَةً عِندَهُ مِنَ اللَّهِ وَمَا اللَّهُ بِغَافِلٍ عَمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ تِلْكَ أُمَّةٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ لَهَا مَا كَسَبَتْ وَلَكُمْ مَا كَسَبْتُمْ وَلَا تُسْأَلُونَ عَمَّا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ.
Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, according to my interpretation of the Holy Quran, was a law-bearing prophet. Before him, Hazrat Nuh was a law-bearing prophet. And before him, Hazrat Adam alayhi salatu wasalam was the first law-bearing prophet. Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam has two positions. One, before the age of Hazrat Noah's Sharia was over, that was 950 years since it came, Hazrat Ibrahim lived 50 years of his life during his Sharia. So, وَمِنْ شِيَّتِهِ Ibrahim refers to that. In the first period of Hazrat Ibrahim's life, he followed the Sharia of Hazrat Nuh. After that, law was given unto him. This is why the Holy Quran repeatedly refers to his deen. And all his progeny is also mentioned to be following his deen, Ibrahim's deen. Doesn't go farther beyond it. So from that I can infer that about if the dates are correct, as recorded by history, and if they tally exactly with the Holy Quran's version of 950 years of Noah's Sharia, then Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was revealed a new Sharia at about the age of 50. And from then on, he was on his own. He waged a war against idols and images and everything, so his image is not preserved. The person who broke and shattered to pieces all the models and images, how could he permit his own image to be created? That is why we know him from his attributes. And that is the important lesson we must draw from the study of Holy Quran, and we must understand fully. It is not the apparent bodily image which is important. Even if someone is beautiful to look at, if he is bad in his conduct and character, then he is not worthy to be loved. So all that matters is the person inside, his character, the image of his moral being which is contained in his body. So what Allah has done, He has preserved that moral image of all his, not all, but all the important prophets which he wanted to be bequeathed to posterity, so that he can, well, maybe it's a difficult word for you. The images of those prophets have been preserved in the Holy Quran, which according to God could serve as good models for the future generations. So specimens from here and specimens from there are selected by God, and if you look at the portraiture of different prophets found in the Holy Quran, you will find that portrait or the sum total of that portraiture to be perfect in every respect. You can draw some lessons from Abraham, some from Lot, some from Shuaib, some from Saleh, and so on and so forth. Some from Noah, and of course those who followed them or rebelled against them. So all the important things regarding the persons, holy persons of the past, have been preserved in the Holy Quran, and that is what matters. So when you think of Abraham, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, do not think of him as what bodily form did he have. Think of him as an upright man, brave person, who sacrificed or was ready to sacrifice all that he had for the sake of Allah and for the sake of truth. The one who broke the idol worship, who rebelled against idol worship, and kept the flag of unity of God aloft, and prayed to Allah in such a manner that even today our hearts are moved when we listen to those prayers, and we are deeply influenced by the holiness of that man. That is what you should. That is what you should have known, and that is what the Holy Quran has preserved for us.
The whole progeny of Abraham was made prophets, and Moses was one of those. And all those who followed Moses were also the recipient of the same favor which was promised to Abraham when Allah said, La yanalu ahdi zalimeen. What he said was that, of course, I'll listen to this prayer and I'll go on making prophet after prophet among you. Only those who digress from the right path and transgress in their behavior and conduct, I will not give them prophethood. Because if Allah had given them prophethood, instead of being fair, he should have behaved most unfairly to mankind.
But in other regions of the world, different laws came. And for instance, in India, it seems that Hazrat Ram was the law-bearing prophet, and Hazrat Krishna came in the law of Hazrat Ramchandra. And in China, Hazrat Confucius seems to be the law-bearing prophet. Before him also there might have come some or many, but we don't know. Hazrat Confucius, I have read his books, his teachings, and I know he was a regular prophet of Allah and a law-bearing prophet as well, for that matter. So also in other regions, if you search, you would come across some law which was revealed to a prophet of God.
You know, in the summit of religious history, when I say summit, I mean at the sources where things meet, not in the modern term. In the summit of religious history, many common truths have got mingled, and you see them appear in different nations and among different people, and you recognize the common color and common texture of those things. For instance, the concept of cow worship among the Jews, and the concept of cow worship among the Hindus. Abraham and Brahmu, or Ram or Abraham. Instead of Brahma, you could also say it may be the Ram. So, Ram in fact was the lawbringer prophet, and Krishna came after him on his Sharia. So Abraham's time, to my opinion, is closer to the time of Ram. So it could be, Brahma is supposed to be a god, but Ram is supposed to be a prophet of God. I mean, his picture, as it's painted by Hindus, is closer to the prophethood than of godhood. So that is a possibility, that some faith traveled from the Middle Eastern parts where Abraham lived into the jungles of India and got rooted there, and the stories of Abraham got referred to a new personality which was created in his image and in his name, and supposed to be the personality of an Indian prophet. I mean, it's easy to say that, but it's very difficult to prove, because there are other things said about Ram which have no relationship whatsoever with Abraham. His life story, the rest of it, is so many things. The points of differences are overwhelmingly more. So you can't say that there was no Ram at all. Maybe the similarity between the names is just a casual chance. But the fundamental point to be noted is the similarity of the teachings at the summit, at the roots. And this is a principle with which the Holy Quran lays special stress upon. Not as the scholar of history would say, but in a different way altogether. According to a historian, if you find similarities between two distant people in their teachings, in the fundamentals, he would begin to trace the channels which conveyed one thought to the other, or vice versa. But the Holy Quran claims that Allah directly reveals the fundamental truths to all the people of the earth at different times of their history, and the fundamental truths remain the same. And also the fundamental opposition and the style, and the deviation from the truth, and the worship of false imaginary gods, that also remains the same in style, in texture, in all these things. So it's not necessary for these things to flow from one country to another. Revelation flows directly from Allah because He is the common source. So if a truth is found in India and also the similar truth is found in China and Iran and Arabia, a historian would search for the common linkage between the two. A follower of the Holy Quran, believer of God, would say He is the source. So he should have said it to everybody in the same way. This is the reason of their common features. And the opposition and the phenomena of a decadent society and the worship of false gods, that's also common everywhere.
From the biblical point of view, too, you should be well versed and you should be capable of defending the position of Islam. The fact is that Hazrat Ismael is mentioned in Bible as the blessed son, as revealed to Hazrat Ibrahim before his birth, and he is promised of unlimited bounties by Allah. And when you remember, it is said that when Abraham prayed for a son and he was given the glad tidings of Isaac, you know what he said? He said, "In your presence it suffices me that Ishmael be given a long life." That particular verse of the Bible decides the issue not only in this respect, in the respect of the question you have asked, but in other respects as well. They claim that Isaac was the first son. And if Isaac was the first son, how could Abraham reply after receiving the glad tidings about Isaac, "Let Ismael, the long life Abu Ismael suffice to me if you provide him with long life. That means Ismail was the firstborn. And as a firstborn, he was recognized as the first official representative of Abraham. If Hazrat Abraham had not looked at him as the true descendant and inheritor of the blessings, he couldn't have said that. He should have shown great pleasure at the fact that although I was given a son before, but he having been born out of a bondwoman, so he could not inherit the blessings of a prophet. That is the first step they take in that direction. Now, we can counter that through this saying of Hazrat Ismail. If Hazrat Ibrahim was of this opinion, as the Christians would have us believe he was, then when the glad tidings of Isaac was given to him, he shouldn't have said that Ismail was quite enough for me. That is an additional blessing. Because Ismail, having been born of a bondwoman, could not have been enough for Abraham if he had not believed that he would inherit his blessings all right.
And the first man who was appointed by God to create the first house for worship used stone. Then the building got demolished and turned into ruins until Hazrat Ibrahim found very small sign of the old building, only a small remnant, and he rebuilt the Kaba. So perhaps Hajar Aswad is that stone which he first discovered as the oldest remnant of the Kaba, and out of respect for the history of that stone, he put it in a very special place, and that is why it is so highly respected today. There is a tradition of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam regarding this stone, that when Baitullah was made, this stone was sent from heaven, and it was white like marble. But as it entered the earth, due to the sins of earth, it got blackened and charred. This tradition is to be studied very carefully and interpreted. So, I have looked at it from many angles. I believe that it is just possible that in the first instance, when the house of God was built, in the remote past, we don't know the history. There is no annals which have kept record of this. But we know that this was the first house of God built for the people. That is on the statement of the Holy Quran. So I believe that when it was first built, it is just possible that as a sign from God, some meteors may have been showered in that area, and the stones provided for that building was provided from heaven, in that sense. That is literally possible, not only possible, but according to the traditions of Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this is what must have happened. And we know that as the foreign bodies enter the earth atmosphere, because of very high friction, the stones which enter, they burn, and this is how you see the shooting stars. So that burning, due to the thick atmosphere of the earth, might have charred it, and it's possible that in the beginning, if we had seen it in the space, it was white. So that might actually have happened exactly as it is. And I believe this is what happened. But also I believe that it is a symbolic language. It is a symbolic language that the first time the mosques are built, they are built of white stones, pure and simple, because of the tradition of the pure intentions of the builders. They are built for the sake of Allah, for the worship of Allah, and for nothing else. But later on, the same stones are charred by the sins of those people who go to worship apparently in those mosques, but not with the same sincerity of purpose. They call partners by the side of Allah. They indulge in sinful thoughts and this and that. So originally that stone or the stones which build that mosque might have been white, but ultimately due to the sins they turn into black. So this is the effect of sins in metaphoric terms, not in real terms. But both are parallel threads of reasoning. In the metaphoric language we can understand this message. In the literal sense, it is not only possible, but I believe it just might have happened exactly like this. Now, why will you kiss that stone? The second part, and what's the evidence attached to it? Well, anything which has a significance of love, through which you can reach a certain event, some certain momentous event in one's life, or which reminds you of a beloved one, or of a very dear event, that thing becomes dear to you. And kissing a thing is not revering it. Kissing a thing is not worshipping it. Even if a friend of yours has sent you some present, sometimes you're overwhelmed with emotions and you kiss that present. Not because you begin to worship it, but because it reminds you of a dear one. So, number one, the reason why you kiss the stone may be because it was actually sent from heaven for the purpose of building that mosque by God. So, it's the greatest possible emotional event that might have happened in the lifetime of any worshipper. That Allah sent stones from heaven, they who were not there accidentally, were intentionally with the design sent down from heaven for the building of the first mosque, for the first place of worship of Allah. So that makes those stones very dear. And if you kiss them out of love for Allah, out of reverence for God, out of deference for His very kind treatment, very special favor He shown to human beings, that is just normal. There is nothing abnormal. This is exactly, if you had not, knowing this, that this had happened with the stone, not liking to kiss you, that would have been abnormal.
The fact is that whenever the building of the Kaba, rebuilding of the Kaba is mentioned, in one instance, Hazrat Ibrahim ﷺ is known to have prayed to Allah that raise that prophet from among them. وَبَثْ فِيهِمْ رُسُولًا مِنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. This is applicable, and only the name of Hazrat Ismael is mentioned to be with him. And it is that house, twice we find this mentioned. First, before that house is built, it's in the early stages, and there is no town. And there the prayer begins with Rabbi Jal Haza Baladan Aminan. That, O my Lord, turn this place into a city. It is not Rabbi Jal Hazal Balada, but it says Rabbi Jal Haza Baladan Aminan, that this barren place, this deserted place, I request you to turn into a city. And Hazrat Ismail is mentioned with him. And then again this is treated at length when Hazrat Ismail is known to have offered himself in sacrifice at the bidding of his father, of course, but he was ready by himself as well. And then again it is repeated that he left him there and went, and the sacrifice was completed. So that prophet which is promised in the Bible in various places, and that prophet is not only mentioned in the Old Testament, but is also mentioned in the New Testament. So that prophet was to be raised
from the followers or from the progeny of Hazrat Ismael. According to this parable of vineyard, it is said that first employees come in the form of laborers to work for the garden, and the unruly people, the rebellious people around, come and loot the garden and destroy it, and also kill those laborers. Now they are the ordinary prophets, as the Christians themselves interpret. Then ultimately God decided to send His own Son, and that is Christ Himself. Now then, after Christ comes God Himself. That means now the biggest of the whole phenomena is to be revealed. Now if Son is to be taken literally, then God should come literally. Then the whole parable is a literal explanation, and the laborers should also be taken literally. Only the other day, when the Cambridge students came to me, one of them was very persistent with this parable, but he was honest enough ultimately to accept to this argument when I gave him this argument. I said, all right, let us first decide whether this parable is a metaphor or a literal statement. If the laborers mentioned are literal, then the whole thing should be taken as literal. Son of God as well as God Himself. Then Jesus does not return anyway. He has come once and has returned as failure. Then comes God. If it is to be taken metaphorically, then the Son of God is not real Son of God. That also has to be sacrificed by you. You have to compromise on this as well. That Jesus came metaphorically as Son of God, and having failed, Allah decided to manifest Himself in a greater way, so as if Allah Himself had come. And as if will be added now. So I told them that look at the Bible, not a single prophet, including Jesus Christ, has ever been described by Bible as God. It is the only Quran book, the Holy Quran, which describes Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam in two places as manifestation of God. In one instance, the Holy Quran addresses Him as Ma Ramaita is Ramaita Walakin Allah Rama. In another instance, the Holy Quran says Allazina yubayi'unaka innama yubayi'un Allah Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. That those who are getting initiated at your hand are in fact getting initiated at the hand of Allah. And to further emphasize this statement, it says, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. It is Allah's hand which is over their hands. So that completes the picture. And those who do not take these statements as metaphorical, as literal, for them it's no problem. Because right from the beginning we understand the whole phenomena and see it solved. It's so simple as that. And those who insist on its being literal, they will run into many more problems than they will be able to solve. They will retain the so-called literal concept of Son of God, but they'll have to sacrifice the whole parable for the sake of this.
People from various walks of life, from various schools of thought, they come and make different demands. Some say that he should be the descendant, the new prophet should be the descendant of so and so. And some say that he should hail from that and that city. And some say he should be from that and that people and nation or religion. So the demands from all over the world vary and they are different. Then the issue is only this: who is going to decide whom Allah should give His blessings? Is it Allah or somebody else? If Allah is free to choose, let Him choose. Because it is not just their point of view. The fact is that the Holy Quran enlarges this question in the context of many other demands. There were Arabs who said he should have hailed from that city, that big city and that big city, the twin big cities. Like the Muslims today demand that the Mahdi should have come from the two big cities, Mecca and Medina. At that time when Hazrat Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam appeared, the two big cities were not Mecca and Medina. They were two different cities. So the demands, if you further go out of the Middle East and go to India, the demand there would be that the Prophet or the final Prophet or the final, let's say, manifestation of God was to appear from among the Brahmins. And the Buddhists would say the final blessings of Allah was to be shown to the descendants of Buddha, and so the descendants of Confucius, and so the descendants of Zoroaster. It goes on and on. So how can you handle each one of them without there being a central weapon of defense available to you, which could hit them all together and with the same severity? That central weapon has been mentioned in the Holy Quran. The Holy Quran deals in one sweep of the hand with all the questions belonging to this category. It says, Ahum yaqsimuna rahmata rabbik, that the question of who is going to be chosen by Allah rests with Allah, and He will not be dictated to by human beings.
Many religions were found in the Arabian Peninsula. Judaism, Christianity, idolatry, idol worship, Sabiism, religions other than the ones revealed to the Mediterranean belt. And also total monotheism without allegiance to any religion mentioned as above. There were some people who believed in one God and in good deeds, and that was their simple religion, but they did not follow any book because they had no access to any particular book. They were born among the idolaters, but they did not like idolatry. They rejected it because of their pure nature. So they loved God as they saw evidence of God's existence in nature as they understood it. And they loved their Creator and they worshipped Him as they pleased. Just a flow of good ideas and love from them to their Creator, that was their religion. So all sorts of people were there. As far as Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam is concerned, we find him always on the religion of Abraham. Right from his childhood, that was the religion on which he was born, in which he was brought up. Not that he had read anything about it, but that was inbred in him. That was an innate quality of the Holy Prophet's character. And that is what is referred to in the Holy Quran in many ways, directly and indirectly, that he followed only the religion of Abraham. There it does not mean that he followed the Shariat of Ibrahim. That is a different thing. It only means his basic fundamental approach to God and his attitude to Him vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So there it was Hanifa, always inclined towards God. In every decision he made, it was in favor of what he thought would be approved of God, and against the material gains. So that guided his life prior to the revelation of the Wahi, the Holy Quran to him. Abraham was, according to the Holy Quran, was a most disputed personality. Christians said Abraham was a Christian. And the Jews said, Abraham was a Jew. And the Holy Quran said, he was much before Christianity and Judaism came into being. So what do you mean by Abraham was a Jew and Abraham was a Christian? Now this was the dispute of Abraham, because Christianity thought Abraham supported the view of Christianity to be born later on. And the Jews believed that Abraham rejected the so-called principles of Christianity and he stuck to the pure monotheistic principles. So that is Judaism. So the Holy Quran refers to this error in chronology and tells that he was born much before. He only followed one religion, that is Hanifa. He was always inclined towards God. So if that is your religion, that is Abrahamic religion. But as such, no one was head of Abrahamic religion because it did not exist in the form of any institution. It was inherited first by Judaism and then also by Christianity. Both claim to be belonging to that father of prophets. Hanifan is the word because when it's used when it happens in the end, then you don't pronounce the tanween, that is noon part. So this is why it's called Hanifa. Hanifa means the one who is inclined in one direction. And here in this context it means Abraham who is always inclined towards God. That is to say, if you try to make a stick stand on its own, you will have to strike an equilibrium between right and left, or it will fall in one direction. So if you try to do it, either it will fall on the right or left or sometimes forward or backwards. But if somehow there is some error in your vision, and it is possible, you always leave it in one direction. In that case, it will always fall in that direction. So some people are also slightly inclined towards one direction. Some inclined towards evil, some inclined towards good. So in this context, what the Holy Quran wants to explain is this, that Abraham, right from his childhood, was always inclined towards God and godly values. Whenever an issue appeared before him where he had to take a decision, he would, without doubt, without hesitation, always decide in the right direction. So that was the attitude prior to revelation of God to him. And this attitude is described in a different way, in a very beautiful way and picturesque way, about the Holy Prophet of Islam in the Quran in Surah Nur. It is said that he was like an oil on who was even ready to light up on its own. It was so refined, so pure and so light that had not a flame of fire fallen upon it from above, it was just ready to light up on its own. Then the flame of Allah's revelation also fell upon it. So it became Nuran ala Nur. As if light was ready to light. It became a double light. More intense. That describes the character of Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and religion of Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam prior to prophethood. That even before God spoke to him, he was entire goodness. Not goodness in himself, but a goodness which would not be contained within itself. It must spill over and lighten up the atmosphere. It must let its benefit flow to the others. it will not be content with just being good by itself. That is the example of the oil which is ready to light. Even if the flame of revelation had not fallen upon it, it was ready to light up by itself and to try to improve the situation around it. That was the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة والموفون بعهدهم إذا عاهدوا والصابرين في البأساء والضراء وحين البأس أولئك الذين صدقوا وأولئك هم المتقون يا أيها الذين آمنوا كتب عليكم القصاص في القتلى الحر بالحر والعبد بالعبد والأنثى بالأنثى فمن وفي له من أخيه شيء فاتباع بالمعروف وأداء إليه بإحسان ذلك تخفيف من ربكم ورحمة فمن اعتدى بعد ذلك فله عذاب أليم ولكم في القصاص حياة يا أولي الألباب لعلكم تتقون.
لَيْسَ الْبِرُّ أَن تُوَلُّوا. So by itself it is not goodness for you to face either to the east or to the west. In itself, this is no act of goodness at all. But if you do it for a higher purpose, under the order of a higher being, then obeying is the goodness in fact behind this act. Suppose a soldier is ordered to stand at a corner and to keep standing until he drops dead. If he does that, by itself it's not an act of goodness, it's an evil act in fact. Because he kept standing there for apparently no purpose until he dropped dead. So apparently a very bad act. But still, in the history books of nations, you find it highly praised, this act on the part of some soldiers, that they prefer to die under orders rather than to decide for themselves what was good and what was not. Why? Because it was not no goodness to stand. It was in fact an act of goodness to obey your orders and not to raise questions of whys. So this is exactly what is meant, that when you face Kaba, to face Kaba in itself is nothing. And this is also an answer to those who say that you are also idolaters. Those are the Hindus who sometimes allege that Muslims are also idolaters, because as we are praying to idols, we face them, so they are facing a building, that is Kaba. The Holy Quran negates this notion and tells us that to face in any direction in itself is nothing, is totally meaningless. Only because Allah tells you to do that and you do it, so that becomes a bir. And this is applicable to every act. Not only facing, it is just an illustration. But in every act of goodness or contrary to goodness, you find the same principle in action.
The capital punishment only tells you that a killer must be killed, and he can also be pardoned in circumstances. But if it is decided that a killer should be killed, the method how you kill is up to you. It's not a fixed method by Islam.
The question is that if somebody is murdered, what is the Islamic teachings about it in reference to the possibility of forgiveness? If the question is asked, if the near relatives do not agree to forgiveness, then what is the Quranic teaching about it? The Holy Quran does not give the right to forgive a murderer to the state, but it gives that right to those who have been wronged at his hands. The one person who is murdered, he is no longer here, he doesn't belong to this earth. But the closest of relatives who would have inherited him, they have the right to decide if the murderer is to be forgiven or not. In case of forgiveness, blood money is agreed upon and then it's permitted. At times, there are nations which are at war with each other. Or even if not at war, they have certain agreements, and somebody from one nation kills another person, and there is an agreement that in such case the offender nation would be responsible and will have to produce either the murderer or the blood money for that. That is called qisas. So Allah Ta'ala says that it is a must for mu'mineen, that in this case, that you must take qisas. قُلْ وَلَكُمْ فِي الْقِسَاسِ حَيَاتٌ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. There is life for you, that is the national life. There you do not forgive, because then it will teach irresponsibility to other nations. They must be held responsible for such crimes of transgression against their border nations. So it does not apply to the individual murder at all. It is not mentioned. You can't take law into your own hands. The Holy Quran tells us that if a fly takes away something from your food or from your body or something, just a little bit, tiny little bit, you are so helpless you can't take it back. So what could you do there to get that back from the fly? The only thing is that you should pray to Allah and ask Him for vengeance or retribution if you are in such a mood as you cannot forgive and you cannot rest in peace. This is what you mean. Still you are not permitted to take the law in your hand. And there are also possibilities that somebody, even if he wanted to, he could not take the law in his own hands. There are despots, nations, there are despot kings and usurpers of power who are cruel in wide scale, and sometimes they commit murders in large numbers, sometimes they imprison people in large numbers, and the people of that country live in a stage of agony and they can't do a thing. So what would you suggest they should do? The point is, there are situations where somebody is found to be helpless, and if he believes in God, the only recourse open to him is to seek refuge in prayer. Where individual murders are mentioned, individual transgression is mentioned, the Holy Quran says it in so many words, and this verse is applicable to all such situations. وَمَنْ أَفَا وَأَصْلَحَ فَأَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ. That if somebody decides to forgive, provided that his forgiveness would not encourage evil, but would cause reformation, in that case his reward will be with his Lord Allah. So Islam promotes forgiveness everywhere except in certain situations which some of them are mentioned in this verse itself. If you tend to forgive while you know that your forgiveness is going to cause greater trouble, and the culprit will be encouraged rather than discouraged by the act of forgiveness, then Allah does not permit you to forgive. There is a condition, man afa wa aslaha, it's bracketed. If somebody forgives, causing thereby to be a reformation in the ways of the guilty, that is the meaning, then Allah would be very happy with you and would reward you. Otherwise, you just take your revenge and just that much, as you have been wrong before.
If somebody is a mass murderer, as we have said, no punishment is enough for him, because he has taken hundreds of thousands of lives, and in exchange he has to offer only his life. If somebody is a mass torturer, he would be torturing many life hours of human beings. Yet even if he is tortured throughout his life, he has only to offer one life hours of one man. So how can you take your revenge here on earth? The only revenge lies in the hereafter. Otherwise, it's impossible to bring to book all the criminals and to dispense justice to them properly. But whether he is put to prison to elongate his torture or put to death, that is insignificant as compared to the crimes he has committed. But Islam believes in capital punishment. Also, Islam believes in exceptions. And the right to forgive a murderer and turn his capital punishment to a lesser punishment or to total forgiveness is the right of the next of kin of the person murdered. It is not the right of a third person judge. The Islamic principles are based on human psychology. If somebody's brother is murdered, or father or son is murdered, what right has the government to forgive such a person? That person or those persons who have been deprived of their dear one's life, they alone have the right to forgive or not to forgive. This is exactly what the Holy Quran tells us. Law is the general, capital punishment is the general law. Murder for murder. But possibility of forgiveness is also open. And that possibility of forgiveness will be utilized not by a third person judge, but by the next of kin of the person murdered. If a person is a public danger, then the right of forgiveness will be taken away from the next of kin. Because they can only forgive the past crime, they cannot forestall the possibility of a future crime. So that is a different type of problem. In that case, the state will of course take her foot down and say, for the sake of the safety of the people outside, you may forgive, but we can't forgive and we must take preventive measures.
The penal code is not a man-made penal code. You may have differences of opinion as far as the interpretation goes, that some Muslim countries are not properly understanding the spirit of the penal code of Islam or the letter of the penal code of Islam, and they are attributing wrong things to Islam. That is one way of considering this aspect. But apart from this, whatever you reach yourself, whatever conclusion you reach yourself, that would be in effect acceptance of God's word. The conclusion may be yours, but the conclusion would be to the effect that I understand that Allah wants this to be done. So where would be the room for human interference then? Unless you prove it from the Holy Quran that such and such injunction is not a permanent injunction, it is conditional to the developmental stage of a society. If a society is found to be in such and such stage, at such and such stage, then this would be applicable. If not, then it will not be applicable and new laws are to be invented by human beings themselves. The human consciousness and development of human consciousness and awareness and education in Europe is just theoretical. The realities of life speak exactly to the contrary. For instance, the crime of murder has risen much sharply ever since the punishment of murder has been abolished, that is, the capital punishment of the murder has been abolished. These are the facts which speak for themselves. And this is why in some countries there is repeated pressure on the governments to turn back to the old capital punishment, because the murder is on the increase. So where is that consciousness? With the passage of time, consciousness grows, does not diminish. And these social measures, or the so-called social measures, have totally failed. The incidence of murder in the Western societies, particularly America, is so high that the underdeveloped countries cannot come nearer it, despite the fact that the compulsion is the least. Economic pressure is the minimum. Yet, despite the social awareness and all these measures and the abolition of capital punishment and apparently moving towards humanitarianism, is increasing crime. Crime of every type is on the rampant. Still, in comparison, the crime rate and the incidence of crime plus the nature of crime, its heinousness and hideousness, is so great and terrible, even in United Kingdom, that when you read about people behaving to small girls and small children here in this society, there is such awareness. Where one does reach? What does one draw the conclusion then? That this social awareness is enough? The fact is that this moral deterioration all over the world has the one single cause. People are turning away from God. The same is applicable here as in the Eastern societies. In the so-called Muslim countries, there is no Islam. People in practical values are running away from Islamic morality. And in fact, they are running away from believing in a real existent God. They are just believing in a myth. The result is that comparatively, both these societies are drifting away from moral values. Now, looking at it from a different angle, you were here in London when I was here in 1955-56, and ever since the program of social awareness has made quite some progress. And can you honestly say that the moral values have also risen in accordance with the social awareness, or have they gone down the hill? There was a time when if you dropped 1,000 pounds somewhere, it would reach the lost property office immediately. If you left a packet somewhere, next day or the day after, you just report to the lost property office and they will say, this is your thing, you can take it away. I was in the habit of losing things. I still go on losing things, but now people help me collect them. But at that time nobody helped me collect. During my 2.5 years stay, there was not a single incident where I lost something in the train or at a picnic spot, anywhere, which was not retrieved through the lost property office. And today, you try something, leave a few things here and there in 5 different places, or in 4 different places as Hazrat Ibrahim tried things, and then see whether they come back to your call or not. So this is just a mythical thing for somebody to claim that the social awareness is gaining us something. They are two completely different things. The crime is springing from a different cause. The roots of crime are embedded deeply in a sort of atheism, which is either conscious atheism or unconscious atheism. And due to the increase of atheism, the crime is increasing everywhere in the world. In Japan, people think this is a very highly developed society and there is no crime. Yet the organized prostitution nowadays in Japan has reached such a stage that the entire government of Japan has totally failed to suppress it. And it's not just prostitution. It's like it's a combination of abduction plus prostitution. Thousands of girls are abducted from Korea, from Philippines, from other places. Under false pretense, they are taken to those places, to some places in Japan, and against the contract, their passports are taken away, and then they are made to serve as prostitutes. And this is an open secret. The government of Japan knows it. They try to remove this evil, but they cannot. So is other crime as well. Shoplifting for a person who comes from an alien society to England is just a godsend to him, because of the restrictions in which he finds himself there are suddenly or apparently suddenly are removed, those restrictions. So it's a law of nature. When people are brought up under strict control, suddenly you release them, and even if they were not previously in the habit of doing something, they begin to do things. Like we have seen some Pakistani ladies who are brought up under strict parda. Sometimes there are such poor things who, when go out to the British society or some other Western society, they think, oh, nobody can stop us. So you must chuck away everything. And similarly, girls brought up in harsh environments, when they are married, sometimes they show their reaction. So it has nothing to do with Islam. This is just a common psychological reaction which occurs. As I told you, the social awareness, according to their own claim, is increasing. Is it directly proportioned to the increase of crime or inversely proportioned? That is to be seen. It is, in fact, the more the social awareness is increasing, more the crime is also increasing. It is not inversely proportioned, it is directly proportioned. I don't claim, I know this is wrong to say, that it is because of social awareness. What I want to point out is that despite social awareness, this is happening. It has different causes. And the social awareness has totally failed to curb crime or to in any way influences it favorably. So it is just a talk, nothing more. Now these Western scholars, despite the fact that they appear to be very fair, they know where to hit and how to hit. And in sometimes consciously they mix things up, what is called in Arabic talbis. And they are past masters at talbis. This is what is described as the jaliyat. They look like your friends. In some places they praise you highly without any restrictions or restraints. And suddenly, like Mr. Mayor, Sir William Mayor, they say something, out of a soft mouth, which hits the very roots of the religion, which they have been praising. So they praise, their technique is that they praise the people sometimes, but hit the religion whenever they can. They praise Hazrat Umar, they praise Ahmad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then you think that they are your advocates, they're very fair-minded people. In high rhetorics, they are praising our lords and so on and so forth. And suddenly, they would say one or two things here and there, with some apologies, which will completely deflate the whole thing they had themselves inflated. So that style I can understand that. The fact is that this comparison is unscientific, unfounded. There should be no comparison of any society in the name of religion today. Because religion is neither playing its role there nor is playing its role here. Neither the Christianity is responsible for what is happening here, nor Islam is responsible for what is happening there. Religion is being used as political instruments. When the punishment in the name of Islam is meted out, it is to suppress a society, not for the purpose of ingratiating Islam into that society. When they speak of Islamic penal system, it is only to control the possibility of an uprising against the regime. So through these means, they strike terror. While the measures which are taken to improve the morality, which should precede the application of penal system, those measures are non-existent. Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam, through a message of love and conviction, first created that society in which theft had disappeared. Stealing was seldom to be seen. If anybody did by chance do it, he was so truthful that whenever he was apprehended, he would admit it. Sometimes his conscience pricked him so much that without anybody having noticed his having stolen anything, he would go and present himself for punishment. There are so many incidents of this nature that in every type of crime this was happening when the penal system of Islam was enforced. So that shows that penal system of Islam is not suitable for every society. First, the standard of the society has to be raised as Hazrat sallallahu alaihi wasallam raised that standard himself through a long effort and sacrifice. That society then became a fit recipient of that penal system, which would not look strange at all in view of the high standard of morality there. If that is the standard of morality in this society, then to punish a thief by cutting his hands is not at all strange. It would appear that he had absolutely no justification, where his economic requirements were fully met by the state. That is an additional factor. Nobody was permitted to die of hunger. His minimum needs were provided by the state. Where is the room for stealing? Plus all that moral teaching which I have mentioned. So, number one, it would be a rare occasion when you will find somebody steal in such a society. And if he does, then he deserves this punishment, because hands are provided for a purpose, to earn your bread and living, not to deprive others of their rights. So it's not only a punishment, it's symbolic. It reminds the society what is the purpose of life and why Allah has provided you with certain things. So, in all that atmosphere and background, Islam should be understood. But these people intentionally leave this all out and begin to compare a depraved, decadent society of one region with the decadent society of another region, and begin to attribute things to imaginary things. This they call Western civilization. That they call Islam. And neither it is here nor there. You would never notice them comparing Hinduism with this civilization. Why don't they do it? Do you think crime is less in India? It is far more heinous in nature and in incidents. There is no comparison. They never pick Hinduism out because they are fundamentally full of hatred against Islam.